Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me, in my new series, The New World Order, and I'm going to jump back in time. 2007, media and press releases. I thought we'd take a little snapshot of what happened in 2007 concerning global warming. Climate change. Or as this document says here, as you know, I've been collecting printed out press releases since 2005, when I started my investigation. This is just some of 2007. Just some. And I have another stack here that I selected to start reviewing, flashing through these press releases. Just trying to give a snapshot of what was said and done in 2007. World on verge of climate catastrophe. The Times of India. Paris, United Nations Chief Ban Ki-moon called on Saturday for urgent action on global warming, warning the world is on the verge of a catastrophe. 2007. Where's the catastrophe? And in 2015, recently, this is January 2016, when the Pope came to America, he said it was a crisis, an emergency. We have to act right away for global warming issue. And President Obama recently said, it's an emergency. We have to act right away. It's a crisis. So back here in 2007, they were saying it's a crisis. And it was coming out of the United Nations Chief Ban Ki-moon, as top scientists were due to issue a new report on climate change for policymakers. Where have I just heard that before? On the biodiversity document? For policymakers? This is all about deceiving everybody. This is a 900-page book from the United Nations published that I thought I ordered, and I got this little summary. Summary for policymakers. When did this come out? $1995. Global biodiversity. And they're moving forward. They're calling it Sustainable Development now. Agenda 21, and the new name is Agenda 2030. And I believe if you divide 20 by 30, you get 666. Just saying. So back in 2007, we all agree climate change is real. I'm not going to forget this book. That's just too crazy. But look at the bottom. Essential skills to stop climate change. I'm going to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. You can't stop climate change. We have summer, fall, spring, winter. And we have El Niños, warming periods. We have cooling period, ice ages even. So you can't stop climate change. It's not even an issue. And according to the Nobel literate Aidan Gaidian, however you say his name, I mentioned in the last video, Nobel literate, he's examined it. I mean, he's a smarter guy than me. And he says the satellite data says there's been no essential change in the last 100 years. Deviation from the last 1,000 years, 2,000 years, that anybody can look at. If they just look up ice core samples images on Yahoo, Google, they will see a whole website dedicated to the ice core samples taken by scientists, showing the graphs and even matching with the warming periods in history, when the crops were abundant and kingdoms were growing, and the mini ice age when they had the dark ages, because the mini ice age really ruined a lot of crops, and a lot of people were hungry and starving. It was a dark age, an ice age. So it does happen. None of this has to do with man-made issues or we do not need any kind of regulations. It's all about the New World Order, the New Age, as I keep saying. It's a lie, it's a deception, and ridiculous material like this is coming out. Look at the polar bear. Global Warming Survival Handbook, and on the bottom it says they want to stop climate change. And it comes from some organization, official companion to the Life Earth concerts. So it sounds to me like a lot of New Age, Kabbalah, ascension type stuff, trying to destroy Christianity and the world as we know it, and reduce the population by billions, if there is 5 or 6 billion, which I doubt. But anyways, let me get back to the document. We all agree climate change is real, and we humans are its chief cause. That's what it says here. Second paragraph, first sentence. So this is why they're trying to get people to believe in sustainable development, Agenda 21, and all these other issues, terrorism, microchipping people, the New World Order, which is apparently supposed to be pretty horrible according to the Bible. Don't believe the deception. And remember, Lucifer does control Earth. He offered the whole Earth to Jesus. And Jesus told Lucifer, in my Father's world are many mansions in heaven. So he certainly didn't need Earth. And the people, so that's what it says here. Yet even now, few people fully understand the gravity of the threat or its immediacy, the UN chief wrote in a commentary in the International Herald Tribune. I have always considered global warming to be a matter of utmost urgency. He has always? Well, the phone ringeth. Have to do my job to make a few bucks to sustain my reality. Buy food, gas, insurance, pay the rent. Anyways, back to this 2007 document. Ban noted recent acceleration in the melting of glaciers and polar ice, and pointed out that the collapse of an at-risk Antarctic ice shelf could rise sea levels up by 6 meters, 18 feet, inundating coastal cities, New York, Miami, Shanghai. He says here, I am not scaremongering, but I believe we are nearing a tipping point. And there's been so much proof since then that nothing has changed. One piece of evidence I have, remember that's 2007, and this is 2010 Nexus magazine. Climate Gate chills man-made global warming theory. 2010 March-April issue, volume 17, number 2. So I read all this, as you can see. Pages and pages by some serious scientists. read just a couple bits. Man-made global warming has now been exposed as a deliberate lie constructed by some of the world's leading scientists. When on November 17, 2009, a hacker broke into a computer used by the University of East Anglia's Climate Research Unit, where one of the world's most four global temperature data sets is held. Climate Research Unit, CRU. So they were collecting the data at this facility, and then released in a 61 megabyte zip file containing 160 megabytes of climate change data on the internet. The results put science as practiced in the 21st century in the most shameful of lights. Indeed, controversial Australian journalist Andrew Bolt has labeled the hoax as the greatest in modern science. I could sit here and read this whole thing, but you probably can go to this guy's website and read it yourself. Philip Coppens. Put pause on your computer and go check it out. Suffice it to say, smarter people than me, citing all kinds of scientists, and we know that they're trying to create a new world order, new age. So back to these documents here. It's going to get crazier. So you can go look up this document. Please do. Don't believe me. You can just key in the title of this thing and you'll find it. As you can see, my research has been pretty consistent for 10 years, printing out stacks this thick every year. 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And now I'm starting number 16. And a lot of them I didn't print out. They're just saved on my computer. Many more. Cost a lot for the ink and the paper and stuff. All right. So 2007. Effects of global warming. We've had hurricanes. I think it was in 1918 or something, 100 years ago. Galveston was hit by a hurricane. The whole island was wiped off the map. Killed everybody who didn't get off the island almost. So throughout history, we've been having good weather and bad weather. It's documented throughout history. But whenever they can, because the United Nations panel offers dire warming forecast. Scientists laid out a timeline for the planet's future in April 2007. Well, they didn't contact these scientists. Hundreds, thousands of scientists have opposed the United Nations research. The world population surpasses 6.6 billion. So wait a minute, what's the problem here? Dire warming forecast, but in this same article here, they're more concerned with 6.6 billion as more people now live in cities than in rural areas, changing patterns of land use. I'm convinced they're lying about the number of people on the planet. They lie about everything else. Yes? No? Bangkok, Thailand. Yet differences remain stark on how to control carbon emissions. So are they worried about global warming, climate change, overpopulations, or carbon emissions? And remember, plants, trees, and all that thrive off of CO2. We exhale CO2. And as Bill Gates says, we want to reduce CO2 to zero. So does he mean he wants to kill all the people because we exhale CO2? So back in 2007, people believe this propaganda. Here one person says 6.6 billion people can use a lot of resources. That's what it's all about. The elites want to have a pristine planet for themselves. The king says, keep out of my forest and don't shoot my deer, if you check back in history. But whether or not this warming thing is all our fault is not for me to say. But this earth has gone through a lot of changes in its life. This is just one of those changes. So you'll read the comments on these press releases. You can go look up this one. I think it was Hitler or Goring that said, tell a big lie, tell it long enough, and the bigger it is, the more people who will believe it. So now we have one dated 11/3/2007, think tank, climate affects security. So imagine people checking their email or watching the news or on the computer, reading the New York Times, and this stuff just comes on and on and on. And what has happened since 2007? Nothing. Except for government sky spraying chemicals in the sky, HARP systems, wars, terrorism, even with crisis actors, and more government-made, not population we the citizens made. Look at the billions they're spending on weapons. A pittance to what's happening with the population. The people, the middle class is disappearing. The people are getting poorer. Climate change could be one of the greatest national security challenges ever faced by U.S. policymakers, according to a new joint study by 2 U.S. think tanks. So are they going to convince our policymakers, representatives, Congress, the president, to take action to suppress people's rights to use their own properties? Right to own properties, biodiversity, fencing off most of the land. Experts completing final climate change on 11/12. Experts completing final climate report. The UN's top climate official warned policymakers and scientists trying to hammer out a landmark report on climate change that ignoring the urgency of global warming would be criminally irresponsible. I'm reminded of the ridiculous sign that guy had in the gay parade. I bet hell is fabulous. New Coast Guard task in Arctic's warming seas. The new Coast Guard task in Arctic's warming seas, October 19, 2007. For most of humanity, the Arctic Ocean has been an ice-locked frontier. But now, in one of the most concrete signs of the effect of warming climate on government operations, the Coast Guard is planning its first operating base there as a way of dealing with the cruise ships and the tankers that are already beginning to ply Arctic waters. Well, the way I understand it, and recently there's a press release that the Arctic ice has expanded. Gore, UN panel, win Nobel Peace Prize. Al Gore. So what is the Nobel Peace Prize? How come Obama got one of those months after being elected president? What did he ever do? Something crazy here. Former Vice President Al Gore and UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change won the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize Friday for their efforts to spread awareness of man-made climate change and lay foundations for countering it. So let's see what else it says here. Let's read one of the comments from one of the commenters. This one guy writes, Coolwood, global warming does exist, but we humans are not the cause of it. Besides, a warming of the Earth is a good thing. Well, it would free up all that land in Canada and Russia, which is half the planet. Never mind the North Pole and South Pole, which, by the way, there are old maps that showed that they were thought out years ago. So Al Gore isn't walking the walk. Of his 3 homes, the Nashville, Tennessee home is 10,000 square feet, and the monthly electric bill is over $1,200. He tries to explain it away, but there is no reason for 2 people to have a 10,000 square foot house. That's excessive gluttony, and I'm speaking for all the people who have huge houses. Let's not forget about his yacht, or yachts. Ozone hole shrinks 30%. FYI, the governments of the world have exploded 400 nukes in the atmosphere. Of course, they got this flat Earth theory out there, dome theory. I know, it sounds funny, but apparently something's up there because the government was exploding 400 nukes when they were trying to put up rockets. Something's a little strange. How come there's never been an actual picture of Earth from space? How come when they were on the moon, the guy didn't turn around and take a picture of Earth? How come? How come on the moon you couldn't see any stars when they were taking pictures of each other? Lots of questions. No answers. Maybe it's all fabrication and deception. Ozone-destructing gases in the atmosphere, such as chlorine, bromine, originating from man-made products like chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, remain in the air but are on the decline as they are banned under the Montreal Protocol, which was signed on 16 September 1987. Yet they fail to mention exploding 400 nukes high up in the atmosphere. What were they trying to test and see? As the polar spring arrives, the combination of returning sunlight and the presence of polar stratospheric clouds leads to splitting the chlorine compounds into a highly ozone-reactive radicals that break ozone down into individual oxygen molecules. So just another thing to say here. What's real? What's truthful? What are they trying to blame on us? And apparently during my research, like I said, I don't just believe what I read. I go to Wikipedia and other sources and look up information. In this case, I looked up sea level. And apparently, since 1880 to 2000, it's been on a steady rise. How much of a rise? Centimeters. So 20 centimeters. About 8 inches in 120 years. So if you do look at the charts from the ice core samples, you will see there is some warming and cooling. And I would maybe suspect that the sea would rise a little bit and then when there more ice is made. Which, by the way, recently, this is 2016, there's supposed to have been some record amount of ice in Antarctica and Iceland. We're not getting the truth. Another one here. 9/3/2007. Arctic sea ice extent may have fallen by 50% since the 1950s. Well, not too long ago, 2014, NASA satellite images showed more ice. So again, why all this bombardment of this obviously slanted the plunging waterfalls and soaring crags chiseled by the Merced River draws millions of visitors each year. But the crowds are precisely what threatens the waterway and the park. The crowds are affecting Yosemite. Somebody doesn't like humans on the planet. Well-known conservative groups like the Sierra Club and Natural Conservancy aren't directly involved in the fight, though the Sierra Club was among more than 60 organizations that signed a legal brief supporting an earlier version of the lawsuit. They want us to set a quota on the number of visitors coming into the park, which is something we just don't want to do. So again, it all boils down to that apparently these New World Order control freaks who control our planet and live like kings and queens and unbelievable opulence want a lot of us dead. So that also supports my theory that I don't think there's 6 billion or 7 billion people. If they're lying about everything else, rising sea likely to flood U.S. history. (9/22). UN summit to push climate talks. So here I was back there in 2007 investigating what I'm reading in the news. The press release. Yahoo News, the Associated Press, Main Street News here. UN summit to push climate talks. So they were worried about too many people in Yosemite. When I grew up in Maine, you could pull over almost anywhere on the side of the road and go walk in the woods. And hunting season, go shoot a deer. Nobody bothered you. You didn't bother anybody. Shoot a turkey, pheasant. We lived on chickens and rabbits on a farm. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Al Gore, and the leaders of some 80 nations coverage on the UN on Monday, converge on the UN on Monday for a summary warming Earth and what to do about it. SUMN, that's what it says here. The unprecedented meeting comes just days after U.S. scientists reported that melting temperatures this summer, Arctic Ocean's ice cap to record low size. I expect the meeting on Monday to express a sense of urgency in terms of negotiating progress that needs to be in the UN climate brief. President Bush, who has long opposed negotiating limits on the greenhouse gases blamed for global warming, will participate in the day's meeting and will attend a small dinner Monday evening, a gathering of key players hosted by Secretary General of the UN Ban Ki-moon. 9/23. The last one was on 9/22. This is on 9/23. We got here one on 9/20. Arctic vault takes shape for world food crops. In a cavern under a remote Arctic mountain, Norway will soon begin squirreling away the world's crop seeds in case of a disaster. So they're loading up a vault in Norway with all kinds of seeds, preparing for some kind of disaster. Dynamited out of a mountainside in Spitsbergen Island, around 1,000 kilometers north of the North Pole, from the North Pole. The store has been called the Doomsday Vault, or Noah's Ark of the plant kingdom. A little strange. Meanwhile, people probably are not aware of this, but they say that, let's say preppers like me, have a closet of beans and corns and peas and rice and dry goods, enough for a few months to survive on. And I do it every year, and every year around Christmas time, if nothing's happened, I donate it to the poor, hungry people or friends who feed the homeless, which I did this year. And then I replenish, so I don't let it get out of date. It's just prudent to kind of secure yourself in case there would be something strange. World War III, a plague. You have to stay at home. World scientists meet on global warming. Scientists from around the world on 1/29 January. So the other one there was later on the year. Scientists from around the world gathered Monday in Paris to finalize a long-awaited authoritative report on climate change, expected to give a grim warning of rising temperatures and sea levels. All you got to do is key on these keywords and so here I was back in 2007. I started my investigation in 2005 when I had one of those big zero birthdays and I went to Costa Rica, sitting at a tiki bar in Jaco Beach. I was the only American there. And these people from all over the world said, "We feel sorry for you Americans. You don't know what's going on in the world." They told me lots of things that I didn't believe. When I got back to the United States, January 2005, my birthday was on that month, I did a little research, and week after week I got more concerned. At one point I jumped in my truck and I drove over to Barnes & Noble, went and looked for the books that were referenced, and they were all there. These people were telling me the truth. The information is for anybody to find if they look at it. We're under threat. Civil war was planned. The war over there in Germany and France, 5 years later, and called it the Confederate War, and they used those cannons and everything, was planned. A few years later, World War I was planned. World War II, we've gone over these, was planned. False flag was initiated in both of those. Taking over the Middle East, 9/11 was an inside job, planned false flag. Even in Vietnam, they said that the Vietnamese had sunk one of our boats. And later on it was proven to be false. Korean War, all this stuff benefits the elites, selling lots of weapons and bullets and supplies. It's a business. So is this global warming stuff. They want the rest of us to use less while their opulence continues, almost like the Hunger Games movie. Waxman seeks climate inquiry evidence. The Democratic chairman of the House panel examining the government's response to climate change said Tuesday there is evidence that senior Bush administration officials sought repeatedly to mislead the public by injecting doubt into the science of global warming. So they play this bad cop, good cop thing all the time to get us, to drag us into the conversation and deceive us. Scaring people and scaring people over and over. 2007, February 13th. Rising seas threaten Britain's most loved beaches. So in 120 years, maybe 8 inches, if it's true. But they want this crisis doomsday news put out there to the public over and over and over and over. And again, I'll say it. Was it Goring or Hitler who said, tell a big lie and tell it often enough and people will believe it? Some of Britain's best-loved beaches and coastline, from Golden Cap to Dorset to Formby Sands in Lancashire, threat of erosion and flooding, the National Trust said on Tuesday. So here you are in 2007 being fed all this fear-mongering, crisis, urgent threat, the world's going to end, and it's 2016. Almost 10 years later. Nothing. EU nations move toward common energy policy. The 27 EU nations were moving towards a common energy policy, agreeing on cleaner fuel targets while watering proposal to force the breakup of the sector into production and distribution operators. We have made a breakthrough, and we are now adopted a draft energy action plan, said Germany economy Mergloss, who chaired the Thursday's meeting. They've had advanced technologies. We could have free energy back since Tesla days. And Mr. Morgan said, no way, we can't make money off it, so the people can't have it. February 28th, La Nina's brewing, forecasters warn. Forecasters warned Tuesday that a La Nina weather pattern, the nasty flip side of El Nino, is brewing, bringing a threat of more hurricanes to the Atlantic. I think since 2007 it's been pretty quiet hurricane-wise. April 6th, 2007. Climate report. Poor will suffer most. The world faces increased hunger and water shortages in the poorest countries, massive floods and avalanches in Asia, and species extinction unless nations adopt to climate change and halt its progress. How can you halt climate change? It isn't like your house thermostat that you set at 68 or 72 and it just stays that way when the unit turns on and turns off, etc. We had huge storms when I grew up as a little boy in Maine. Snow this deep, up to your neck. Avalanches. Couldn't open the front door of the house. According to a report Friday by an international conference on global warming, agreement came after an all-night session during which key sections were deleted from the draft and scientists angrily confronted government negotiators who they feared were watering down the findings. Well, I'm telling you here now, the scientists who wrote this report in Nexus magazine in 2010 said there's no such thing as global warming. It's all propaganda. After you've been doing this research for 10 years and collecting, nobody could say I haven't collected the data. Bush sets deadline for emissions effort. President Bush responded Monday to a Supreme Court ruling by ordering federal agencies to find a way to begin regulating vehicle emissions by the time he leaves office. So the Supreme Court ruling ordering the president to regulate vehicle emissions. In the Rose Garden announcement, Bush said he wanted to move ahead pending any separate legislative approaches. The new rules will cut gasoline consumption and greenhouse gas emissions from motor vehicles. And again, I think they have advanced technologies. They just don't want to give it to the population. They want the crisis, as George Bush Sr. said. Out of chaos and anarchy will come the New World Order. Merkel G8 agreement on June 7th, 2007. G8 agreement on climate change. Chancellor Angela Merkel said Thursday that the group of 8 has agreed on a plan calling for substantial cuts in the greenhouse gas emissions blamed for global warming. Again, I'm all for reducing pollution, but it's not affecting the weather on a planet-wide scale. Can't happen. No measurable temperature change. But we know since 1880, when Albert Pike wrote the letter to his friend Mazzini in Italy, that they wanted 3 world wars to bring about a new world order and a new age. So they do have an agenda, Agenda 21, now called Agenda 2030. Sustainable development, biodiversity. They basically make it plain if you read these documents. There's too many people for them. And I think they're lying about the number, as I've already said. They lie about everything else. How are you going to believe them? So the G8 agreement on climate change on June 7th. Powerful tornado ravages Arkansas, 40 hurt. Storms happen. They've been happening. Kansas has been known as Tornado Alley. Arkansas is not far away. Mysterious disappearance of bees creating a buzz. You gotta like that. Writers. The disappearing bees concern me. And I don't think it's anything to do with global warming, climate change. I'm sure the bees are used to the climate change. Winter, summer, spring, fall. U.S. beekeepers have been stung in recent months by the mysterious disappearance of millions of bees, threatening supplies as well as crops which depend on the insects for pollination. Well, we know that there's sky-spraying chemicals in the sky. I've been photographing it and videoing it since 2005, and it was always pretty intense wherever I went, to Maine, North Carolina, New York, Florida, everywhere. So I suspect the dumping of whatever they're dumping in the sky could definitely kill the bees. All right, Bush sets global climate meeting. September 2007. Bush sets global climate meeting. The Bush administration unveiled plans on Friday for global warming talks next month that will bring together the biggest polluters to seek agreement for reducing greenhouse gases. Again, I'm all for reducing pollution, but I know that CO2 is what plants and trees and all that thrive on. Just making a point that this stuff is coming out in the press releases on a daily basis. 2007. Cyclone hammers Omar, veers towards Iran. Get me a drink of water here so I can speak better. All right, moving along here. Air pollution cuts rainfall over mountains. March 2007. FYI, why don't they mention that they've been sky spraying tons of stuff in the sky back then? Maybe it's not air pollution. Maybe it was all that dumping of chemicals that is patented and admitted at least since 2005. It goes back even further. Clouds from over mountains, when air is pushed upward against one side of the mountain and subsequently cools, water vapor in it condenses. As the air descends on the other side of the mountain, it warms and the clouds evaporate. They understand the science. They know what the sky spraying and HAARP systems can do. 2007. Spreading deserts threaten world food supply. Just doesn't end with these people. September 2007. Spreading deserts threaten world food supply. September. Climate change redraws world maps. Drastic changes to land and water wrought by climate change are forcing cartographers to redraw their maps of the world. Evidence of the effects of human activities on the Earth's features through climate change and construction efforts, such as irrigation projects, can clearly be seen in the new edition of the Times Comprehensive Atlas of the World. Its editors say, the atlas is one of the world's oldest and most authoritative atlases. The new edition was published on September 3. If we all reduce our driving, shopping, and business by 1/7, we'd pollute that much less. As religious leaders in their congregation go green, they've neglected one Judeo-Christian teaching that could cut energy consumption and pollution by 14.2857%. That's 1/7, just as the Sabbath halts work one day out of 7 days. The day of rest, long considered a gift from God, is meant to create a joyful, liberating respite from worldly concerns such as work, consumption, activities that both use the earth's resources. Out of the Christian Monitor. I know with the economic, intentionally made, government-made crisis, we all have to work harder to pay our bills. Just saying. While they're spending billions and trillions on weapons in this United States empire, new one world order, new age, destroying Christianity, propaganda effort, new world order. If they spent 1/10 of that on us people, we could have Sunday off, Saturday off, the whole weekend. But I am aware that in 2007, 2008 was when the beginning of the baby boomers were supposed to begin retiring and drawing on their Social Security. I believe that's probably why they had the 2008 stock market crisis. It really forced a lot of people to delay their retirement. It busted the bank on a lot of people, money they had saved, including me. I mean, I thought I was set for retirement prior to that. And then my business suffered more and more, and so do other people's business. My business is a business consultant type thing, helping people with their financials. And I can see the drop in income in most businesses. And we know about the housing crisis, and this is all over the world. So they are putting the screws to the people, causing people to be more stressed with financial concerns. Jobs, savings, retirement. I believe it was all intentional. Because the baby boomers were going to start retiring in 2007, 2008, probably 1/3 or more of the world, United States at least, 100 million people probably, go on Social Security. So they had to delay that. Alan Greenspan, look up Alan Greenspan and economic destruction. And you will see that he said they were running a program called economic destruction in Congress. And one of the men said, well, Senator, I think, won't people be hurt? And Greenspan said, yeah, a few people will be hurt. Just saying. They're controlling this thing, and they really have little concern for we the people. As the Georgia USA Guidestones say, they would like about 80% or more of the world's people dead. So one has to wonder about the threat of World War III, plague threats, terror threats, pole shift threats, earthquake threats, comet threats, overpopulation threats, global warming, would food supplies would dwindle, which would be just the opposite if you think about it. If we had global warming, more stuff would grow, as history has shown us. So that's just a big blatant lie. In Greenland, an interfaith rally for climate change, standing on the bow of a passenger ship before the fast-melting glacier. Fast-melting glacier. So they're sitting on the bow of a ship and they're watching the glacier melt. Can you believe this news? Religious leaders from around the world lowered their heads in silent prayer for the future of the planet. Surrounded by icebergs, Sunni, Shiite, Buddhist, Hindu, Jewish, Christian, Shinto leaders committed themselves last Friday to leave the planet in all its wisdom and beauty to generations to come. They're saying all this stuff to go green, to control the people, so the people will accept biodiversity, fencing off most of the property in the country, sustainable development, creating a stressful situation where people go hungry, maybe steal, then they have to microchip everybody. It's the New World Order. It's been in the Bible. It's been prophesied. Albert Pike said they were going to have 3 world wars. So much of this stuff has been exposed. The communists in the 20s and 30s admitted in congressional hearings they had plans, and they were infiltrating the churches to destroy the religions. Eating less meat may slow climate change. You can't make this stuff up. So here I am with my 10-year plus research. Just imagine me back in 2007. Every day I went and checked the email and saw the press releases. This is 9/13/2007. Cutbacks threaten climate change. The government climate change research is threatened by spending cuts that will reduce scientists' observations from space and on the ground, the study says. Alright, here we got one. Distant space collision meant doom for dinosaurs. A collision 160 million years ago of 2 asteroids orbiting between Mars and Jupiter sent many big rock chunks hurtling towards Earth, including one that zapped the dinosaurs. How do they know this? How do they know this? They don't know this. Europe mops up after storm kills 41. Europeans labored Friday to restore services across the continent after hurricane-force winds felled trees, brought down power lines, damaged buildings, killing at least 41 people and disrupting travel for tens of thousands. And again, they are doing weather control. This is January 2007. Sky Spring HARP systems. Maybe they were testing the HARP system. Racking up climate debt. The United States is an awfully wealthy nation, as is the United Kingdom. It shows in our lifestyles, and it shows in our carbon dioxide emissions. We are essentially energy rich, not necessarily in production, but in terms of consumption. The BBC recently ran an article, opening paragraph below, highlighting some research from the Development Organization, and the numbers tell a stunning yet very real story. Airport CO2 rivals African nations. Bristol International Airport produces the same amount of CO2 from flying each year as the African nation of Malawi, an anti-poverty group said. So the bottom line is what they want to do is get we people in the United States and the world to use less resources, put on a sweater, turn down the thermostat, be slaves to them, cost less, efficiency. But the elitists will give up nothing, you can be assured of that, from the indications. I was watching the speech with President Obama last night. This is the 13th, I think. So it was the 12th. And I got to tell you, I looked at all the people sitting there, the congressmen and representatives. They didn't look healthy at all. They all had red faces. And they just didn't look good. Gore, U.S. blocking climate talks progress. Nobel literate. How did Al Gore get to be a Nobel literate recipient? Al Gore said Thursday the United States is principally responsible for blocking progress at the United Nations Climate Conference. The European nation threatened to boycott U.S.-led climate talks next month, December 2007. All right, 2007. Lightwatcher.com. Featured story, the chemtrail smoking gun. Proof of global geoengineering projects. Illustration, Bruce Conway. Revised 6/20/03, Lightwatcher Publishing. I printed this out on November 2007. For the past few years, investigators and researchers have been searching for hard evidence on the elusive phenomenon of chemtrail spraying. If one searches Google News for articles on chemtrails, with 4,500 periodicals representative, not one article will be found. That's strange, because I was photographing the sky spraying since 2005, and it was horrendous every day. I got pictures of the planes doing it, and the effects. Starts out with a blue sky, they come along and they spray in lines and X's, and the next thing you know, you have a pasty white sky. So if you Google News and you search this stuff, you get nothing back then. Imagine our surprise when we discovered extensive proof of government involvement, funding, sponsorship, multidisciplinary research, policy making, and implementation of global atmosphere modification under the classification of geoengineering. This is the chemtrail smoking gun we have been looking for. So please go look this up. Don't believe me, as I keep saying. Here's the link to the website, if it still exists. Or you can look up the keywords in the title. I'm telling people now to go geoengineeringwatch.com or .org with Dane Wigington. This is probably the beginning of that stuff. The chemtrail smoking gun. Proof of global atmospheric geoengineering. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt in your philosophy. Shakespeare said that. 5 years ago, I founded the Chemtrail Hall of Shame website to document, investigate the elusive chemtrail spraying operations in the skies above my home in the Pacific Northwest. The site can be found at www.lightwatcher.com. So I got 4 pages of information here. The author makes a very convincing case for the pressing need to undertake geoengineering projects. I remember when I was in Maine, Bangor, Maine, at they had a guest coming in from the Climate Change Institute, the CCI. And I had just received a Nexus magazine with an article on the ice core samples and all the graphs. So I brought it to me to that meeting. And during the meeting, they were talking about the world is getting hot and all kinds of disasters were coming back in 2007, 2008. And I raised my hand and I said, hey, I got this magazine that has these charts. They immediately called the meeting to a halt. They said that some of their class needed the room and we had to stop immediately. Because I was asking a question and had a Nexus magazine with me. So we got all these charts here. Policy implications of greenhouse warming, mitigation, adaptation, and science-based 1992. So they were putting particles into the atmosphere to control the weather. Who would have thunk of that? I've only been exposing it for 10 years. I've got hundreds of videos that I have taken on YouTube. Taken and I put on YouTube. Rick Miracle Sky Spraying. Look them up. Wow, here's some impressive stuff here. Following is a partial list of those involved in this monumental study. There's more. Papers of special interest to chemtrail investigators. There's more. So please go look this up. 6 information-packed pages here. The chemtrail smoking gun, proof of global engineering projects. Keywords, search those keywords. So that's just a partial of the documents, press releases and other documents, that I reviewed during 2007. And then, of course, in 2010 came the Nexus magazine, and there was more information, much more research I've done, that clearly identifies. So it says here on page 14 of this Nexus article, his list, Robinson mailed a new copy of the petition to the original signatories, asking them to recruit additional qualified scientists who were skeptics of this global warming thing. His list included 31,500 man-made warming skeptics with science qualifications. More than 9,000 hold scientific PhDs. Almost 31,500 skeptics happen to be more than 12 times as many scientists as the 2,500 scientific reviewers claimed by the IPCC Institute, Climate Change Institute, to form a scientific consensus. So the United Nations, who pays for professors who work at universities, as we all know, they get grants. And so they better produce what the people who give them grants want. So they got 2,500 scientists to say there was global warming. And the other people who didn't care about the United Nations money, 31,500 scientists, many of them 9,000 with PhDs, signed a petition saying that there's something wrong with this evidence. Though the truth might not be popular, Robinson's petition states a truth. There is no convincing scientific evidence that human release of carbon dioxide, methane, or other greenhouse gases is causing or will, in the foreseeable future, cause catastrophic heating of the Earth's atmosphere and disruption of the Earth's climate. Full stop. No convincing scientific evidence. The Oregon chemist warns that no other major scientific problem has ever been tackled the way the United Nations has approached global warming. Least we forget what I keep on pointing out, this sustainable development, global biodiversity in 1995. This 900-page document, this is a synopsis. And they got this for policymakers, your mayors and councils and all your cities and towns and elected officials are getting this scare tactic stuff, and are supposed to make rules to change your life. For the worst, you're going to live on a lot less, in a smaller home, with less amenities, probably making driving a car illegal, or some kind of meter and charge you by the mile. Biodiversity is a vital resource for all humankind. And you got a Rothschild, if this book is not satire. I keep thinking it might be satire. Say nuclear correctly. Few things first. Nuclear is not pronounced nuclear or nuclear, since it's likely to be rolling off more tongues than ever in the coming years. It's better to get that straightened out now. Long the scourge of environmentalists who associate nuke plants with nightmare scenarios, backed up by real-life events of 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl, and now we got Fukushima, so I'm not really happy with nuclear. In this book, there's more craziness in here. Choose your fuel. If 1 million cars switched to biodiesel, would eliminate 5.2 million tons of CO2 per year. Remember, plants and trees and all that thrive on CO2. Bill Gates wants to reduce it to 0. That means people who breathe will have to be killed because we exhaust CO2 when we take in oxygen, inhale, exhale CO2. Drive a fry bird. Well, they want you to put frying grease in your car. Catch the rain. The phone ringeth again. So they want you to go green. They want to control everything we do. They want to make us feel guilty. Climate change, global warming, global cooling, overpopulation, overconsumption. And here it says in this little book, read the label. If you want to be a responsible green consumer, you have to know what you're buying. That means reading labels. Trouble is, some labels aren't exactly reliable. But knowing which ones are legit is essential to ensure that the actions you're taking will really change the game. Meanwhile, they won't put genetically modified foods, GMO, labeling on products. Green is the new black. What's this? Green is the new black. Apparently they have a black person in the picture in this book. If 1 million people washed their clothes in cold water instead of hot water, would eliminate 250 tons of CO2 per year and keep our colors brighter. That's odd. Enlighten your friends. This is 1995, by the way, this book here. Well, I was wrong. Thought I said 95 when I looked at it earlier. It says 2007 here. I make mistakes. Where did I see 1995? 2007. So we saw all those press releases. Oh, I think this was the 1995 document here. Yes, 1995. So 1995, they're worried about biodiversity overpopulation. 2007, when they had all those press releases, and it was a big crisis in government circles. And then in Nexus magazine, they exposed the whole thing as fabricated data. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it helps people to make up their minds what's really going on in the world, what's planned for our future, what kind of propaganda, the deception is coming to make everybody live like the Hunger Games movie. Take the mark of the beast, the chip on your forehead or your arm, because nobody can be trusted, because somebody might be a terrorist with a gun. Somebody might be using too much water, buying too much wine. Rick Miracle reporting.